All right. Well, I think for the benefit of if anybody's out there who ever finds this buried in the internet and like would like to know who we are, I think it'd be nice for us to say, hello, I'm Paula. I make audiovisual cultures podcasts, and I'm just so excited today to have a catch up, a long overdue catch up with my dear friend, Robert JE Simpson, who makes Sunny Punked podcasts and does lots of other stuff as well. So hi Robert. It's good
Hi,
to
Paula.
see you.
It's lovely. I mean, like this is the best way of dealing with the world now is through the screen. I forgot what it's like to see people in the flesh.
I
Um,
know.
Although it's funny you say, I make Cine Punk podcast. I don't think we've done a podcast in months, for
Mm.
various reasons. I mean, not like there's a whole big intention of stuff that I want to do, but it's just not been happening. So I kind of feel like a fraud temporarily, but also like I know I'm busy and I know that there's cine punk stuff is happening. So I'm still working away. But I would
Mhm.
like to know who I was as well. I mean, that's a good question to open up with. Who are you? I've no idea.
What is time? What is identity?
What are people? Yes.
What are those strange looking creatures? Yeah, so I mean that's something actually I'm going to float this idea quite publicly. Is I think it'd be really class someday to do a mashup of those two podcasts, like audiovisual cultures and Sunny Punked. I think a mashup might be quite fun. Um, just I'm just putting it out there.
It has actually already been in my mindset to give you a shout at some point about this. You're on a
Yeah.
list of people that I'm like, I want to find a good excuse to kind of like team up and work with people that I know and I like and I trust.
Oh.
Because a huge part of it as well is like when you're having those kind of conversations and you're doing the stuff for public engagement, there is a certain amount of, I mean, let's be honest, anything that's involved in the performing arts at all, there's ego involved. And sometimes it's very difficult to get a project that with somebody whose ego is compatible. I won't name projects right now, but I have done stuff in the past where I've worked with somebody who I've never met before. Literally, my introduction has been 5 minutes before I've gone on to a job, and it has been like pulling teeth. And
Mm,
the product has suffered as a result of that. And because
mhm,
there's no, I mean, usually if I'm doing something, there's a bit of pre-vetting goes on. There's a
mhm,
call that happens. So you kind of go, are we on the same wavelength? Can I have a conversation with you like a normal human being? Or are you an asshole who is
mhm.
just so concerned with yourself that you can't see the bigger picture? And I try not to work with people like that anymore because it doesn't benefit anybody and it certainly doesn't benefit me.
Mm.
Um, which is probably my asshole egoness coming through. Like, you're making me look bad. I'm making you look good. This is the problem. Yeah. But yes, no, we absolutely should do one, and we'll have a chat with about that, I guess, and see what we can come up with.
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah, that'd be class.
Do some in-person stuff would be good as well, not just the whole online kind of podcasty stuff. I'd like to do more real world events
Yeah.
with looking at a person and kind of reading them in a real way.
Yeah, yeah. I know it's been such a long time since I've done an in-person recording in any
Mm.
way. It's all been Zoom, Skype, all that sort of stuff where people send me their files or that sort of thing. And I mean, I'm still a bit scared of doing that. And obviously I'm stuck in England, the
Yeah.
sinking ship that is the England. Um,
I don't think we're any better back here in Northern Ireland at the moment, to be fair.
but at least it feels a bit more like home. But that's probably just me being a bit homesick. Um, yeah, it's been 2 years since I've been back. Actually, it's two
Gosh.
years. The other day was the last time I left, and so it feels very long, but I still don't feel ready to travel yet. So, and also it's been pretty lean for the past couple of years, which we'll get on to.
Yeah, I mean the whole travel thing's very, very strange. I'm still not massively comfortable. Even getting the bus into town, I feel awkward
Mm,
about doing. But I have a little bit of work going on that means that I have to do a certain
mm,
amount of local stuff. I try and navigate that as carefully as I possibly can. I'm still trying to keep my distance. I did a job up in Derry last week,
mm,
just for the day, for part of the Halloween festival, and I was kind of wary about doing that. Public transport was the worst element of my whole
mm,
trip
mm.
because I had spent 2 hours standing on a train going up to Derry because there was no room.
Oh.
and I am not ready for that kind of situation.
Mm,
But Derry itself was fine. I was in a place well removed from the bulk of the people. If I'd been standing near the guild hall all day, I probably would have freaked out, because
mhm,
when I finished, I came back down to the guild hall and there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people milling around, and you're kind of bustling to try and get through. And I'm like, this is a petri dish, and
mhm,
I am not ready for the petri dish. I don't feel um safe enough yet. But at the same time, I need to work, and I
mhm,
want to work, and I'm missing travel travel for me is a huge part of what keeps my creative juices flowing. It's
mhm,
a huge networking opportunity. Every time I travel, I meet someone, I have a conversation, and a lot of time it leads to something else.
mhm.
Online should make it easier. Like, why have I not been doing more of this kind of thing? I don't know, but um, I think for me, it's that in person is very, very absent, and I think that I'm suffering, and certainly my work is suffering as a result.
That's interesting to hear. I think I've had a quite a mixed experience because I completely know what you mean about being in person and being able to read body language. It
Hmm.
took me really quite a while to get used to video calls. I'd never recorded by video call before, and it wouldn't have even occurred to me to do it before.
Hmm.
We all went into lockdown, and but I think I've just got so used to it, and I've learned how to really deal with the technology and everything, and I've
Hmm.
adapted to it. But I have found it really tough when people don't use their camera and you can't see anything at all, and you don't know when they're about to say something, or you don't know if they are they just reading something, or do they are they not happy at the moment, or it's really that really puts up a more of a barrier, I think.
It's a weird one, because actually, when I think about it, in some ways, I was always prepared for this kind of situation.
Mm,
I used to do interviews and things, and I used to about a decade ago, I edited a horror magazine, and I was at one point I was based in Northern Ireland. My co-editor was in Canada at the
mhm,
time, and then our disreputable publishers, people who I have no love for at all,
mhm.
were based in, I think, New York. So we were. And then I had people who I was working with all over the world. There were people in South America. There were people in Australia. I was taking phone calls at all hours of the night, because that was the only way we could make it work. And of course, it's
Mm,
me bending over backwards to accommodate everyone else, rather than necessarily them doing it for me in terms of timekeeping. But that was a way of doing it. And I'd done podcasts and phone interviews before, and also I do radio broadcasting.
mhm,
And like, I quite like when I first started doing radio work, it was all via phone calls,
mhm,
so you couldn't see somebody.
mhm,
Um, and then there's been a point at which I started getting into studio to do stuff, and that changed the dynamic of the moment. And you could read what was coming up, and you could see the notes, and you're watching the clock, and you're very aware about the next guest coming in. And then it's gone from that back into this kind of remote, I'm a disembodied voice listening to a disembodied voice. And there's been a few times where I've done those, and because you can't see each other, because maybe there's a time delay or whatever else, you're talking over each other, and
mhm,
that bit of it can come across as quite rude,
mhm.
because I can't see, at least I can see you here. So if you're kind of like, Robert, I won't speak, I'll get that. I'll see that
Yeah.
look in your face, which is like, can you please just stop now? I did a I'm monopolizing this here. Sorry, this is how deprived I am of conversation with actual human beings. I did an event very last minute. I think at the start of October, and it was an in person on a stage, and it was these kind of conversations, and it was very strange just to be in that room again. And I think I got overwhelmed with adrenaline and excitement of
Mhm,
actually being able to feed off someone, and to have a room full of, not full, but a room of people that were, you know, talking back at you, to you, with you, was lovely. And I miss all that side of the creation process. I've never missed offices, because I don't like
mhm,
office environments. I don't miss certain aspects of the work that I had been doing. But I do miss the kind of being able to create in a room full of other people, and live in the moment. Yeah.
mhm, mhm.
Don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it does. It does. I'm just thinking. I'm just ticking that over.
But I
Yeah.
do. I do think, like, the whole remote thing, the whole disembodied voice thing, does get slightly easier. I think what you
Mhm.
have to do is you sort of tune in to listening to what people are saying,
Yeah.
because you have to wait for those cues. And I think it's something that sometimes we're not good at doing it in real life, or certain people aren't very good at doing, because they want to talk and they don't want to hear what they're saying. And I've sat and listened to watched interviews happening where you've got an interviewer
Mhm.
who has no interest in what their guest is actually saying. They've got their list of 5 questions and they're going to ask their 5 questions,
Yeah.
and they're missing what essentially is the story. What's the thing that I'm going to be interested in?
Mhm.
Please ask the follow up question. You've missed the opportunity there with this.
I know. Yeah. Probe the narrative. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I hope I've got better at that, of just sitting, listening to people, and then leaving a long gap so that I know they're finished. But you don't always get that right, because some people just talk with really long pauses, and it seems like they're finished, and then they just start again. So, it doesn't always work, but you learn, you live, you learn.
I'm reminded of there's a Monty Python sketch about that, about the pauses and the gesticulations you have to make in order to convey whether or not you're finished talking or you're just having a pause for dramatic effect. Maybe that's what needs to be incorporated. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, so no, it's just so nice to see you, because I think you were one of the people I made a point of meeting up with the last time I was in Belfast, and that was really great to see you. And I feel like we've tried to keep in touch quite a bit on social media.
Mm.
We're both all over the socials, and it's kind of my way of checking that you're all right, is because you do post quite frequently. I think it's fair to say, and it's not.
Frequently, and probably too honestly, if I'm being fair. I probably should hold back a little bit on what I say, but I don't, and that can cause problems because people. I don't think people know how to read it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and occasionally I don't know what I'm saying. There's been a couple of times where I guess I've had phone calls that have been a bit concerned about what you're posting, Robert. And maybe my subconscious is trying to work through something, but I'm working through it very, very public. I've very specific reasons for doing that, which we may or may not get into, but
Mm,
it's been a way of coping with stress and trauma, is to just be really, really open. Um,
yeah.
but it does mean that people sometimes worry when they shouldn't, and they don't worry when they should.
Mm,
But
that's
yeah, no,
interesting. Mm-hmm.
it's good to kind of, and it's good to see your stuff too, because like I always feel like you're quite active and having these interesting conversations with people, and
Mm-hmm.
it's reassuring to see that there's something going on, particularly in light of, I mean, I know we've talked about some of the difficulties before,
Mm-hmm.
and when you have other things that you're trying to process and deal with,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um I think there's a lot of people out there who don't realize there's a lot of creatives like you, or
Mm-hmm.
like me, or lots of other people I know, who are going through a maelstrom of emotions, who really are not coping all that well,
Mm-hmm.
but are still creating and still doing stuff that people are engaging with, and that engagement can be a lifeline.
Yeah, absolutely. I think audiovisual cultures has been the thing that has kept me going the past 2 years. Um, it's been fascinating because moving it online actually meant that it was starting to attract guests. A lot of the people I interview come to me. They find the podcast and they ask you, would you like to interview me for your podcast? And
Brilliant.
I don't always go off and find them. I haven't done a hustle for a guest for ages. Um, and it's a mixture of, that sounds like, oh, your podcast is all very international and very popular. That's not really the case. There's a lot of people out there trying to put themselves and their work out there, so they're actively looking for places to come and
Mm,
interview them. But I think and I will blow my own trumpet a little bit here, because I think people should be doing that
yeah.
when they're doing good work. I consistently get told by these complete strangers, and a lot of them are in America, that I ask really good questions, and they
Mm,
felt that I've really listened to them, and they've asked me things that no one else has ever asked them, because some of them prepare you. Some of them say, oh, here are 5 things you might want to ask me. And I just buck that out the window because I don't want the same as what every other bloody podcast I've been on has. I want
Yeah.
something a bit different, and maybe it's a topic I'm actually quite interested in myself, and I want to, ask questions from that angle, from my own experiences of these things, so there's all different stuff going on there. Um, and so that's been really nice actually when I get that. That's a real boost for me because I have rock bottom self-esteem,
Mm.
and those little bits of positive feedback really just give me something to build myself up on a little bit more. And that is a huge help. It is a lifeline a lot of the time, especially when there is, as you say, there's a lot of personal stuff going on that people don't
Mm.
know about. And I don't post as publicly about a lot of my personal stuff because, in part, because I know I'm being watched by
Mm.
certain people. And I don't want them to know that they figure that much in my life. um, and so there's stuff going on there, and it's not just to do with me, it's maybe to do with my partner as well, and it's not fair on him, and he has no social media presence, so it's not
Oh.
fair to drag him into stuff. And as well as that, I miss olden days Twitter, when you went on and you find your community. Do you
Mm-hmm.
remember that? Was that ever like that for you, when you find your
Mm-hmm.
people?
Yeah, when I first, I mean, I've been on there, I think 13 years now. So I mean,
Hmm.
not a bang on early adapter, but a fairly early adapter. And in that first wave of Twitter, um, I, I mean, I built up a reputation for myself, and part of that was doing online stuff and actually setting up online profiles for other people and companies, and doing it well. And there was a group of people I used to like. We interacted a lot, and we socialized a little bit. And then it all went a bit squirrely, partly because of people got personally involved, which they probably shouldn't have done.
Mm.
And I blame myself for that. I live and learn. And then there were, I think there was other stuff that happened, and there was stuff in my personal life that happened. So I kind of lost that sense of the community. But weirdly, I've kind of come back to it this year. So Twitter, I went through a period where I ended up deleting didn't delete my profile. I changed my profile. I put my profile private. And I set up a new one because of the fallout of certain personal stuff and a horrible relationship.
Mm.
And I didn't feel like myself for such a long time, and I lost a lot of engagement. And then I kind of came back a couple of years ago. I thought I feel like I'm being somebody I'm not, and I've lost a sense of myself. So I
Mm.
started using my old account again, and I'm starting to rebuild. And then I reactivated the account I set up when I was doing a PhD,
Mm-hmm.
which I never finished. So it lain dormant for 11 years, and I reactivated it earlier on this year. And suddenly there's a community I'm part of again,
Mm.
and that's been kind of nice. But it's Twitter now is not what it was
No.
a decade ago. I mean, none of the social media platforms are what they were a decade ago. Finding community is very hard, and unfortunately, every asshole on the planet now feels they have a space to vent
Yeah.
whatever opinions they have. And I mean, look, I completely advocate free speech and people's ability to communicate like that, but it's becoming a lot harder to filter out the drudge. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're building up a portfolio or a reputation, you actually have to engage with the people that follow you,
Mm-hmm.
to do it successfully. Certainly when you're in the smaller numbers, and unfortunately that means in the process you pick up more and more of what might be regarded as toxic personalities. I find,
Mm-hmm.
and they're the ones that I've had to start muting people because
Mm-hmm.
if they want to talk to me about the stuff that I'm interested in, that's fine. I don't care that you have other opinions I don't agree with, but my gosh, I really don't want to read them 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
That's a mini rant. It's clearly this is something that's bugging me.
No, I feel the same. I know what you mean. I mostly hang out on the podcasts account these days. I don't go into my own terribly often anymore.
Mhm.
And it is weird. It's really interesting what you say, that a whole community just came back to you when you reactivate an account, because it's quite rare when I go on to my personal one, the PEA Blair one. And there's just all these people who I've been friends with in real life tweeting, and I'm like, oh, that person's they're complaining, but they're okay. They're doing okay. They're well enough to tweet that thing that they're complaining about. So I'm really glad to see that they're alive in the world, and that's good.
Uh,
Then lots of nasty stuff. Then lots of ads for things I'm not interested in, and then maybe another real world person that I know and care about. So it's a
yeah.
lot of that. And then I just remember why I stopped going in there. So I go back to the podcast because I've curated, it's just full of other podcasters. It's quite a nice community in there.
But I think that's the thing. It's the need to curate your social media. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, anything we put on a social media platform, if we're doing it right and we're doing it well, there is an element of curation in it.
Mm,
But you realize that there's a reason that you have to curate. It's because otherwise it becomes unwieldy and unmanageable,
mm-hmm.
and you get distracted by the other stuff. I mean, there are certain hot topic debates right now that I don't wish to publicly engage in.
Mm-hmm.
I have thoughts on them,
Yes.
um, lots of thoughts on them, but I don't wish to make those thoughts public. And that's entirely my prerogative.
Mm-hmm.
But I am subjected every day to a lot of tweets about them,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
can't. I mean, it's got to the point now where I can't even filter those out because then I'm filtering out people that I actually want to hear from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, it's very difficult. But if that was everything, I mean, like when Trump was in power, it was
Mm,
horrible. Every day was just Trump. Um,
I know.
and when Brexit was happening, it was the same. Although we still got a lot of that, and I think it's the need to create a space that isn't a negative environment,
Mm-hmm.
particularly like I mean for mental health reasons.
Yeah.
Um, and this is Men's Mental Health Month, so I should probably be kind of vocalizing something more about that
Oh,
because
do yeah.
then
Mm-hmm.
my own experiences with that. I mean, it's very important, and it's stuff that I've tried to do events and things around before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do think that there is a need to detoxify what your input is. If you're only inputting poison,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to end up becoming poisonous or feeling ill. So there needs to be a way to kind of limit that. We all have our vices. I mean, I'm sitting here drinking a cup of coffee. Another night I might have a glass of wine while I do one of these things. That's fine. That's a toxin that I'm choosing to put in. But I have to limit the amount of that,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's the same with our social media. So if you're finding that your created account is working better for you and working better for all the other stuff, then that's exactly the way to go.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that one of the best things I've ever done for my own mental health was delete the Twitter app from my phone and never put it back on again. And I have never looked back. I don't have the only one I have is Instagram because
Mhm.
it's just because you can't upload things properly from the computer. Instagram you
It
kind of have to have on your
it has
phone.
changed. It has changed in the last few weeks.
Has
Instagram now
it?
lets you post photographs from your computer
Oh,
on the
does it?
website,
Oh, that's
um,
nice.
which is potentially a game changer because you
Yeah.
couldn't. Although I don't think they've got the filters and stuff working yet, so you still have to have another app to filter everything down because life is seen through a filter, and then upload it. But it's definitely,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, it's literally only just come through though because I think about a month ago I still couldn't get onto it that way,
Uh-huh.
but it has now been activated and it's across the website stuff.
Oh,
So
that's very interesting. But to be honest, mine is it's and again the podcast when it's linked to the Facebook page.
mhm.
So a lot of it I just do it from the Facebook and I pre-schedule everything from there, even stories sometimes. Like it's just I've posted things that aren't coming out for a month or two already, and the scheduler is quite good. I don't know if people are seeing it as much, but
Mhm.
it's better for me if I'm not on it all the flipping time.
That's remarkable organization. I wish I was even slightly organized like that. Mine is like, I've just done something. I must post it on 15 different platforms. Here's 2 hours of my evening gone. I'm not very good at the. It's not that I'm not good at the planning stuff. It's just that I work I mean, I work to the deadline, um, which is potentially a problem because it means that I'm literally changing stuff 2 minutes before it's due.
Hmm.
So there's no chance to pre-promote. Also, I've got this fear now of promoting stuff early and it not working out because
Okay. Hmm.
that has happened a lot. and there's
Mm,
projects that I have announced and talked about and built up that then didn't deliver, and
mm,
then I am left with a rack of guilt and
mm.
feeling like I'm inadequate and a fraud. And that is also something I'm actively working at, but it means that I have changed my strategies to deal with that.
Yeah. And I wonder if part of it is we imagine that people are paying attention and they care. And maybe the
that's
solution is to realize that most people aren't paying attention and they don't care.
that's terribly bleak, Paula. That's the worst
Sorry,
thing you could say.
just to put that truth bomb out there, but that's what I feel about my own stuff anyways. Sure, nobody pays attention anyway. I'll just do whatever the hell I want.
But there's a difference between doing. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily the same thing. You know, like I think doing whatever the hell you want is actually probably quite a good idea, because I think that sometimes we hold ourselves back too much from those
Mm,
exciting creative areas that in trying to fulfill a brief in order to tick boxes, in order to kind of like do something we think is going to be commercial, we eliminate risk.
mm,
And when it comes to creativity, whether it's a it's a piece of art, it's a film, or it's a podcast, or a book, or whatever, if you're literally just trying to tick those boxes and make something that's
mm,
commercial and not take the risk, I think that you lose the chance of something really special coming out of that.
mm,
That doesn't mean that people aren't interested, because what you'll find is that people actually are interested, and it's those unique things that will um, get people in and get them to stay.
mhm.
You know, that it's that repeat. Oh my gosh, I'm talking like a businessman. Like I actually am any good at business. Terrible at business side of things. Good at creating, not good at the business end. But that's the thing, is these people will come back, and that, I mean, that's the feedback that I've always had, is that, but like you said earlier, I asked good questions. I listened,
Mhm.
and I put people out of their comfort zones. Whenever we do live events, I mean, I will try and suggest stuff that's out of the comfort zone. Now, getting bums on seats is much harder in that,
Mhm.
but I know that for the people that are there in that moment, they're going to get an experience or a challenge that is far, far stronger. And I would
Mhm.
rather do that right now. I mean, when you're not making any money off this stuff anyway, I would rather do that and have something exciting for half a dozen people than have
Mhm.
something really bland for 200, because
Yeah.
everyone's doing the bland. Let's do the exciting.
That's a really great point for sure. And I think in a way, podcasting, especially, it gives you that because it's a form of permissionless publishing. And that's an idea I've been hearing about and thinking about quite a bit lately, is that idea of it's not permissionless, and okay, it's not peer reviewed, but
Mm.
it's you know, you can do it without apology, or you can do something without permission. And I'm saying that within reason, I'm not going
Mm.
out there and saying, just totally shit on people. Absolutely not. But within boundaries and within consent and that kind of stuff,
Uh,
as you're saying, just push some limits a bit and do something that isn't what everybody else is doing. Because you can see the same thing 100 million times in YouTube by 100 million different people. And it is a bit boring, as you say. You think, well, I've seen all of this information already on that other video. So why aren't you doing just something even slightly different? Come on. So yeah, I think it's a way of trying to do that. And as you say, not necessarily a huge amount of people are
mm.
going to benefit from that, but somebody will, and that's important. And like you say, we're not making any money from this. I think it's a really big misconception that the general public have, is that we're rolling it in from making this stuff. We're absolutely not. Most people who make any podcasts or anything like that, YouTube channels and stuff, we're making nothing.
Mm.
In fact, some of us have plowed money into these enterprises, and we're doing it because of some other passion. Or I mean, personally, my thing is I have all this training that I'm not getting to use,
Mm.
from my own studies, from a sort of career cut short in academia. I've got all this training, all this knowledge, and I feel very strongly that people should be educated and they should have access to education, and that people should have access particularly to media literacy training. And
Hmm.
I feel like that's in part what I'm trying to put into the world a little bit is, this is a vaguely entertaining way of asking you to think critically about these things. And whether that works or not, I don't know. I may never know, but I'm trying to because it's what I feel is important and I can do it at this point of my life. And I'm aware of the privilege of being able to do that at the
Hmm.
moment. So I think I'll do it where I can. So that's partly why I do what I do, but I'm certainly not raking anything in for doing it.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think if you I mean, you've already said that, if you got people coming to you and saying, "Hey, look, I would like to be in your podcast. Why don't you interview me?" That we like what that they probably have listened to some of what you've done already, even if they're not listened to the whole catalog. So that in itself is an endorsement that what you're doing is good and it's of merit.
Mm.
And I think it's trying sometimes to not only to recognize our own abilities, but also to recognize when what we're doing has been acknowledged by somebody else. Um, because it's very easy to sit there and kind of go, nobody's watching, nobody's reading, nobody's listening, nobody's engaging. People are very passive, I find.
Yeah.
Um, I have a huge problem because I like feedback. If people give me feedback, I can do something with it. Even if you don't like what I have just done, I would like some constructive comments from you so that I can either work out whether it's something I have said is wrong, whether or not I've completely got it wrong, or whether you don't get it and I need to kind of re-articulate. Um, I mean, I think I talked about this. I've talked about this a bit recently. My film professor, um, you remember Sam Rody, yes?
I never met Sam.
Ah,
I never
so
met
Sam,
Sam.
so
Mm.
Sam was my film professor as an undergraduate,
Mhm.
and he encouraged us to argue with him about stuff that he had written, and I loved that approach.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time I remember sitting with him after one lecture, after one conversation after a lecture in our Italian cinema module, and he said that basically I'd made him rethink what he had written.
Mm.
And suddenly he was no longer sure if what he had said was right. And I thought, I like to be a professor and to stand up there and kind of go, look, I'm willing to change my mind based on what an undergrad says.
Mhm.
Um, for me has been kind of a key kind of point in terms of how you engage with an audience. It's that
Mhm.
need to be responsive and to listen. Um, so yeah, so I think it's all those things. I think you should take the comments and the criticism, the feedback that you are getting, whether it's a passive or not. But if those people are interested in what you're doing, that's a really good sign, and I hope it encourages you to keep on doing it. And
Mm.
in terms of the trying to educate, um, yeah, it is a privilege. I suppose it's the privilege of our educate, us being educated in the first place. But it's a really important thing to do as well because academia, I've always found, tends to verge on being quite dry.
Yeah.
Most of the academics, many of the academics that I was taught by, had lost. I felt like they had lost some of their soul. You know, it's like it's all caught up in jargon,
Mm.
and this need to survive in the university system rather
Yeah.
than actually I don't know. There's a disconnect there, but there's also a lot of people that love this stuff, that love film, that love to learn. And why wouldn't you want to bring them on board? Why does this have to be some kind of academic gatekeeping? I don't know. I'm going to go off on another rant if I don't stop.
But I think as well, that's partly where I'm coming from. Absolutely. Um, I got pretty badly broken by that academic system that you're talking about, and still have largely recovered, but there's still never completely there. And
Mm.
but that was part of it. Is I have such a passion for all of that stuff. Total nerd, love other nerds, love nerding out with people. That's all I want to do. If I could do that for the rest of my life, I'd be a happy little pea. That's what it would be like. Just wanna be nerdy with lots of nice nerdy people and not mean nerdy people.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. But how do you make that work? I mean, I know you want to
mm,
talk a bit about I suppose the creating in the freelancing sector.
mm,
It's
it's a tough one.
it's like you. I mean, I want to. I mean, like you, I want to do exactly the same sort of not exactly the same kind of stuff, but the same ballpark. And
Yeah.
I would like it to be something that I get paid for. Um,
Yeah. Do you ever you know when you do radio spots, do you get
yeah.
paid for that?
I get paid from some of them.
Okay.
So it is. I actually chased up. I did a bunch of radio last year
Mm-hmm.
for an obituary, and I'd heard nothing back from most of the channels. So I ended up
Mm-hmm.
having to pursue what had gone on. And so what I've learned is that BBC local radio won't pay.
Oh.
Generally speaking, so they'll have guests on and they don't pay. However, national radio does. So if you're working for BBC Radio Ulster or BBC Scotland, or I don't know, Radio 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll get paid. If you're working for
Wow.
BBC Radio Berkshire for a piece, they probably won't pay you unless it's
Sure.
been some kind of pre-arrangement thing. So
Mm.
I mean, I like that's fine. I eventually found that out. Someone finally got back to me and explained the situation, and I was grateful for it. And at that point, I'd kind of like given up. Um, and I got a phone call like within a couple of days to do another piece, and I was just like, I just want to clarify: am I getting paid? No. Okay, you tell me I'm not getting paid. That's fine. I will work for you if I'm happy doing that piece. What I object to is that a lot of there's so many arts things where they kind of won't talk about the money at
Mm.
all, or when you ask for money, and that's a bugbear with festivals. Like if you're running a festival, I know that you're getting paid and funded. If you're not offering me something,
Mm-hmm.
there's a problem here. At very least, if I'm having to travel, there should be expenses covered.
For
If I'm
sure.
not traveling, there probably should be a fee.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, my rule with Cinepunct has always been if we're getting paid, our fellow contributors are getting paid. Not
Mm-hmm.
every event that we do has been a paying event. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're contributing to an event that I'm running and you haven't got any money, guess what? I haven't got any money. Um, and that's the only way we can do it. I mean, my colleague Rachel will frequently tell me off because I put a lot of work in and I end up getting paid the same as everybody else. This is like, but uh, I guess it's this. I mean, it's the hippie in me, I guess, that sort
Mm-hmm.
of believes in the commune and the need to kind of equalize things. And I don't want to ever not. I mean, I did a job with my brother last year for a couple of jobs with him, and they were freelance jobs, and it was just like it's a split of the money. I mean, we're doing different things. I may have to do additional prep, but I'm just going to split it
Mm-hmm.
because that to me seems a fairer way of doing it. And I don't know. I guess I naively hope that eventually karma will say, "You've done your time, Robert, and here's some actual money now for a bit. You may live. Treat yourself to that piece of cake." But yeah, no. It's a local. I mean, if I'm doing something for Radio Ulster, I would get paid unless I'm promoting an event that I'm doing.
Okay.
If you're promoting your own stuff, then it's a PR piece, really. So why would you get paid
Mm-hmm.
for doing PR?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I've always understood it, and I'm happy enough with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. No, that's interesting. I just didn't know how that worked because you seem pretty, I don't know, that successful is not the right word, but you're fairly
It's really
prolific.
not. Successful is definitely not the right word. I do a fair bit, but I mean, I've done stuff on and off the BBC since about 2008.
Mhm.
I've even done training with them. I had a period of time working for TV, as part of a. God, it was the worst. I mean, it was a great thing, but also a bad thing because it was part of like a job seekers scheme thing, like a
Mm.
training. So you're working full time and you're getting paid your job seekers rate of 75 quid a week. It's just like this is not right. I kind of should be getting
Mhm.
paid a wage whilst I'm working for this. And then you get spat out the far end, or I did. So yeah, so
Mm.
not, and I guess there's an element of I do a lot of stuff, and I'm lucky at the moment in that I'm getting to make regular appearances, but I mean it's once a month is what I'm averaging
Mhm.
on like radio. Occasionally I get asked to do something else as well, but often from another channel that's not paying me. Um, so it's about being seen. I wish people would use me more often. I'm
Mhm.
available to be used more often. Um, and I've never been offered my own slot. I mean, that's I suppose that's the, the pipe dream. I would still like to have my own show, but I can't see it
Hmm.
ever happening. I don't fit whatever brief it is that they need, and I don't have the right contacts or the right voice.
Hmm.
I mean, there's nothing worse than getting somebody, someone here on the radio says, "You've got a great voice for radio, Robert." Well, thank you very much. Please tell somebody who can commission me. That would be even better. So yeah, not successful. Stubborn maybe, and reliable, I guess.
Mm.
Like if I'd like to think, if you ask me to do a podcast or a radio piece or a live event, that I have got to the stage now where I will deliver the goods
Yeah.
professionally.
Yeah.
I might, if it's a shambles, my gosh, I'll probably tell you backstage that it was a shambles.
Mm.
but but on stage, in front of the audience, I'll do what I have to do. And I certainly, I'm not against. It's the critique in me. It's like, if it hasn't worked, let's talk about why it hasn't worked. What was the problems? Why were we not feeling
Hmm.
it tonight? So that when we do it next time with a win, hopefully, that we can get it, tighten it up, make it be something that it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so healthy to learn from that. And I don't know, I feel like we're in a time or an environment where people are really reticent to both make mistakes and to have their mistakes called out, and to just talk really openly and honestly about making mistakes, or it just not going very well. Because I mean, it might not even be people made mistakes. It could be just the tech just went awry, and no nobody's fault was behind that, but it just wasn't working. And so people were discombobulated. It can be any number of things. And it's then, right, next time if that happens, I can learn to react with it in this way. I can hustle a little bit. I can make jokes more so that the audience is and it's just learning how to respond and how to react. And, you only really learn that stuff with practice. If it happens more than once, I think you can't just, or just be aware that it could be a thing that happens. You be aware of that contingency. I suppose that's all any of us can do, is just practice, 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 and crunch it and get better.
That's it. I mean, I think it's the theatrical bit in me. It's the, if you're doing a play, you'll repeat and repeat and repeat. You'll do multiple performances, and I mean, every audience is different. Every night is different. But there are things that and sometimes it'll be like, this movement actually just doesn't feel right. Let's change this. Let's change the way that we're having this conversation. So there's repeatable events. I mean, I think there was a show I did 2 years ago this week, in Belfast, a Comedy of Madness, which is available as a really, really ridiculously long podcast on the Cynic Punk website.
Heard it.
It's like 2.5 hours long. It was way too long. It was a really good conversation. We had a very poor attendance for that.
Oh.
Um, and there were questions about why was that attendance not the way it should be, and I have had a conversation about that. Unfortunately, pandemic has stopped us from being able to kind of really act on it since. But
Sure.
also the show was too long. So when we did it again in London last year, we cut it down to about an hour.
Hmm.
So what you're trying to get is, you're trying to mold it to see how the show feels in different formats. And then if we did it with different guests, I mean, we did both those. It was me, Robert Ross, my comedy historian friend, and Tony Slattery.
Hmm.
And it's also like, is this a show that we can do that doesn't need all three of us? Is this a show we can do as solos? Is this a show we can do without Tony? If we brought another guest in, would that change it? It's trying to get something that adapts, but then there's not even a chance to do these things right now.
Hmm.
But I think it's important to learn, and it's important to learn what went wrong and what went right. And that's all I'm ever interested in, is why have we got a packed house tonight, and did they love us, and why the next night are we staying with two people at the back going, is it me? Yeah,
Mm.
I clearly have
Yeah.
an ego.
Well, like you said, we all have a bit of ego at least, or else we wouldn't do any of these things ever. So, uh, um, yeah, I don't know. I suppose something I was thinking about asking was just, I suppose, the general freelancer
Hmm.
experience, because I I mean, I think when we got on to me suggesting us doing this was you had
Mm,
posted on LinkedIn about having rejections from job applications, and I've had a lot of that over the past year as well. I've really tried to put myself out there, and I've been trying to get jobs, and I'm fairly particular in what I apply for. I'll only apply if I'm interested.
mm,
But I've had a weird experience where I think because I only got feedback from one of these things, and it was because it was somebody who knows me, and they didn't have that many applicants, but they had applicants who were you had active experience in the job title already, whereas mine was just patches
mm,
from this, and that's kind of one of my problems is because I spent so many years focused on an academic career that I really struggle to communicate to people that there's loads of transferable skills within
yeah.
all of that, and they don't really believe it. Um, so you look like you've been had this really narrow focus, but actually you've done all the things because that's what the job entails, and it's just
Mm,
really tough to explain that a lot of the time to interview panels where most of the people don't know any of that. Anyway, so but I got the impression from this person who was really kind and gave me lots of feedback saying, look, you're really impressive, your CV's really impressive, and we just felt like you had it all sorted, and it was as if my CV was too good, and they didn't interview me because they thought I was fine. I was like, no, no, no. I applied because I need a job. Like I have no money coming in.
yeah.
I get about £13 a month for my podcast, and that's it. Like that's all the income I have. Literally, that's all I have. Like I don't even get benefits or anything because it's just so flippin' combative to apply for certain things. The self-employment grants, I've managed to get one of the five.
Mm.
Um, and I had a whole heap of problems with that, so I'm like, I do, I applied because I wanted the job, not because I wanted to show off. So like, did I mess it up that much that they just thought, oh, you've got all this stuff going on, that's great. And I'm like, yeah, I've got all that stuff going on, but I don't get paid for any of it. I need a paid job. So other than that, just no feedback whatsoever. I don't know why I'm not getting interviews and stuff. So I suppose that was just something I was concerned about for you. And I got
Uh,
the sense as well that I think it was more of an intimation. So I don't know if I'm terribly right about this, but I got the sense as well that you felt that we weren't really supposed to talk about this. We weren't
yeah.
really supposed, as freelancers, we're not supposed to moan. I think self-employed people have been really silenced during this whole pandemic about what their experience is. And it did come up in a podcast episode. I did one with a musician who actually contacted me on LinkedIn because he was trying to look for work. He
Mm,
was targeting podcasters to say, would you hire me to do music for your podcast and that sort of thing? And I was like, I'm so sorry. I wish I could give you work. I've got nothing coming in either, but
mm.
you're very welcome to be a guest if you'd like to talk about your stuff. And at least we've got some in-kind help for each other like that. And he was all up for that, and we did a really nice episode, and he was very candid about talking through. I mean, he managed to get the SEISS, self-employed income support scheme, but even when you qualified for the full whack of what they would give you, it was not enough to live off, and very
Yeah.
often they were giving you 5 months worth, 3 months worth to cover five months, so it just wasn't anywhere close to enough. Anyway, so yeah, that's a lot of stuff I've just thrown at you, but I think I was just feeling like, well, I feel very isolated in
Mm.
my specific experience, and it came across to me that you were as well. And I just thought, if you were happy to, it'd be nice to talk out some of that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so
I'm okay with talking about a certain amount of it. There's a couple of bits that I won't get into for
sure.
different reasons, but I mean I've been in a weird situation because for the last 5 years I'd had part-time employment,
Mm-hmm.
and that had been my main source of income. So when I was working as a sort of museum tour guide, um,
Mm,
for a very popular tourist attraction based here in Northern Ireland. It's on my LinkedIn, so people can find it anyway. But when the pandemic hit, things got unpleasant. I mean, actually, there was
mm,
unpleasantness before that I'd already been. I've been quite. I've been involved internally in. They don't support unions, so I've been involved in the internal equivalent,
mhm,
in terms of sort of staff representation, and I'd always been very vocal and active in that, and trying to find a way to mediate through lots of disputes. Um, and then when the pandemic hit, there was a lot lack of information. My shifts dropped rapidly overnight, which was terrifying because I was meant to be going to America, and it was like suddenly I don't know that I can afford to go now, and my flight's meant to be in a month, but
mm,
then everything got cancelled, so it was fine. And then there was no support initially because at the start of the pandemic there was literally no support available. The government
mm,
hadn't said they were going to give us anything; just there was no work. And if you didn't have a contract,
mhm,
if you weren't, if I was a casual worker as well, I worked near enough full time hours a lot of the time, but I was a casual contract, so basically a 0 hours contract. The gig economy, unfortunately, is something that a lot of us can't avoid, and the advantages of it were that I meant that if I had something else come up, if another opportunity came up,
mhm,
if there was a chance to travel, I could go and do that.
mhm,
So it was great, but then there was this other flip side, and there wasn't a lot of support there. There was a lot of not information, um, and then there was redundancies announced,
mm,
and I ended up being involved in the negotiations for the staff being made redundant, and also was involved in other elements within work. But it became a very unpleasant space. But on and off throughout the pandemic, they did make use of the furlough arrangements.
mhm,
So I was getting a certain amount of furlough for a couple of stretches, but whenever things reopened again, which they did mid-pandemic, and then they closed and then they reopened again, I didn't get paid. So I have had no guaranteed income. I've had no income properly since about must be May or June of this year.
mm, mhm,
Um, with Cinepunct, which we had a whole pile of stuff lined up. We literally the week the pandemic actually shut everything down, we had been in meetings about a new project that we were quite excited about, and we were waiting on a contract to come to sign, that was going to guarantee us some money,
mhm,
and then that all fell apart.
mm,
And we tried doing a couple of shows and stuff, and again, it just became impossible to do anything. And we got some support. We were very lucky in that the business got some support from Arts and Business Northern Ireland, and I'm very grateful for that support because it allowed us to try and keep the wheels of the business running for a while, and allowed us to do a little bit of development on a couple of projects that didn't work out.
mhm,
We just couldn't get the uptake because the pandemic changed everybody's relationships with the sort of stuff that we were hoping to do, and it became a much more competitive field as well.
yeah,
Um, but also, I mean, we've got other problems with that in that at the moment the company is set up as it's set up as a not for profit, which is
mhm,
resulting in the fact that money's going into the company occasionally, but then we can't take it out to pay ourselves. So
mm,
I'm not making any money from my business right now,
mhm,
because it creates more complications in terms of taxes and all the rest of it. Um, and I want to try and keep it floating, and I want to try and see if we can build up in 2022. I want to see if we can kind of get a second wind off it, because I know that what we're doing is quite good. We just need some additional support in terms of bookings. Give us some
mm,
bookings and we'll probably be okay.
mhm,
Um, but I haven't been able to apply. I mean, I haven't gone for the self-employment stuff. I find it very difficult to apply for grants. I've never managed to get a grant application through for anything I've applied for.
mm,
And I have struggled, but have so far managed to avoid going on to benefits
mhm,
this pandemic, because I did it five last time I did it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and it soul destroying and just
yeah,
brought me a lot. It's more hassle than it's worth,
yeah,
and I really don't want to go through that again. I don't want to have to be sitting there every week kind of going through 20 applications for jobs that I can't get.
exactly.
I don't want to have to sit there and justify my life choices to somebody who doesn't get it, because some of them are great, some of them are really sympathetic, will give you the good advice, but they're in the minority, and there are other people there
Mhm.
who'll look at you and kind of go, well, you're not going to get a job doing that then. Um, and it's just frustrating. And it's the other thing is that anytime you do get work, you then have to declare that, and
Mhm.
then it gets taken off your benefits, and you still have to go and do all the other things that you're supposed to do as part of the benefits, even if you only got
Yeah.
like one day. I mean, and because of the way that the rates work for the stuff I do, oh, if I do one day of work,
Mhm.
like one day I work a fortnight or one day I work a week, that'll take out anything, any benefits, even though I'm underemployed.
Mhm.
It just completely counterproductive. So there's no point. I really don't want to go down that path again. So right now I'm
Mhm.
struggling to try and make ends meet. I am trying to get more freelance stuff, but it's really, really difficult. And that's raising other questions about what it is that I'm doing wrong, or
Mm.
what have I done to piss people off, is kind of my personal question. Is like, okay, have I fail to deliver on a job? Was something I did not good enough? If so, why didn't you say to me? And why won't you book me again? Is it because I'm in Northern Ireland?
Mhm.
you know which actually, for a lot of businesses, that, I mean, I've been told by people, like, I would use you if you were in London, but you're not,
Mm.
so I won't, because it's not worth it financially. It's like, well, I mean, actually it can be worth it financially for me.
Mhm.
I may not make a lot of money on this, but this could potentially be something I want to use for something else. So I find it very difficult, and most people don't want to hear that you're not coping, that
Yeah.
you're poor. um yeah, I mean, it's different if you're, ah, I think that there are some people out there who, for sake of their personality, for their looks, or their fan base, they can come up and say, "Look, I'm struggling. I can't afford the 20 grand this month to pay my rent," and people will just throw money at them.
Yeah.
It's a culture I can't get my head around. I kind of want to try and find ways of giving people something,
Mm.
but even that's a struggle, to
Mhm.
try
Mhm.
and monetize everything.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know if this really answers or even points in the right direction for what you're sort of asking, but I don't find it easy, and I don't like the hustle. So
Yeah.
that also doesn't help, because basically the hustle is like, I'm skint. I need some work. Can I work for you? Thank you very
Mm.
much. Give me the job and give me some cash. And like, I've tried going for real jobs this year, so many real jobs, and some of those have been like multiple level, like 3 or 4
Mhm.
stages of the process.
Mhm.
And I have gone for stuff that I know that I am qualified to do, that
Yeah.
it pays less than I want to be getting paid, but I can do it. I can do it blindfolded. Can't get those jobs.
Yeah.
I've done jobs that maybe were a bit of a sidestep for me, but I still thought I would have fitted the brief,
Mhm.
more or less. I've even gone for stuff that I've been told to apply for and not got
Yes.
anywhere with it. You
Yes.
you literally have the business telling you, Robert, you should apply for this position. Are you sure? I don't think I'm right. No, no, no. Please apply. You stick in your application, you still get nowhere.
Yeah. Not even an interview. I've had the
No.
same this past year as well.
Oh,
So frustrating.
I got 2 rejections from the same business last week. I mean, I already
Mm.
knew I wasn't getting the jobs because I hadn't heard back from them. I got through the second stage of interviews for one and not for the other, and I knew that I'd done the
Mm.
two of those kind of room assessment things in the same day, and I knew I hadn't been so good in the first one. And then I just couldn't believe I got even in for the. Maybe I shouldn't have just told them. I'm surprised to get asked back. It's just like, I was being honest. I didn't think you wanted me. I didn't think this was quite the right. I mean, I was better fit for the first job. I didn't get that. I got asked back for a second interview for the second job. I probably wasn't the right person for that post.
Mm.
I don't know. You start to doubt yourself after a while.
Mhm. Mhm. I think that's the thing is it's really difficult to keep your spirits up and to keep going on to the next thing. And I think that's where a lot of people don't necessarily understand, especially if most of your friends are people who have jobs,
Mm,
who have a secure income and that sort of thing, or they've never had to do a hustle for very long. They haven't had a prolonged period of precarity in their
mm,
lives. And for me, this is round two of a prolonged many years of precarity. and it's a different flavor of it. And
Mm.
I think in the first time when I was trying to get an academic job, I was trying to kickstart that career and I was doing lots of temporary contracts. At least I had that singular goal.
Mm.
Now I'm going, I'm actually good at quite a lot of things and I don't know what the right thing for me is. And I have to keep rewriting myself for all these job applications that never frigging go anywhere. And that's exhausting and it's taking up time.
Mm.
And it's taking up time that I could be using and making something that I can put on the internet for sale, or making that I can put out there for somebody to listen to and learn something from, or making something that, or working towards a book proposal, or,
Mm.
something. And you're like, but, you're just so confused about where do I put my energy today? Because actually the possibilities are rather endless, and that's overwhelming when you don't know what you should be focusing on and what's going to work and
Mm.
what could get me some money, because I could work on an application for a job all day and put all my resources into that all day, but then it won't go anywhere. But what if I
Yeah.
spend half of that day working on something that it has some other kind of effect, but it doesn't get me a job, it doesn't get me money, but there's some other chain reaction that happens rather than I just go in a figurative bin somewhere after a day's work. Do you know what I mean? So
Mm.
it's actually really overwhelming. How do you decide what to do with your day every day, because you don't know what's going to come of it? Where there are people who are going into work and they know that they're going to do maybe a load of menial tasks or something, but they're going to get paid for it.
Mm.
Because I used to have a job where I went into work and I had a crap time, but I got paid for
Mm.
it. Something came of it for me. Um, and I just, it's the overwhelm of what I even do. What's the point of any of this? It is quite enormous, and it isn't as easy as just try something, just do something, and I just do something all the time, every day. I never stop working.
Mm.
What thing is going to work this time? What do I try next? And I feel like I'm not really allowed to moan about that, because I should feel lucky about all the lovely things I have in my life, but that doesn't
Mm.
make it any easier. It doesn't mean that the hard things aren't hard,
Yeah.
and actually I feel very precarious because I'm living in my partner's home, and if anything happens to him or something goes wrong in our relationship, I'm pretty screwed. I mean, my little security fund, my emergency fund, it's dwindling all the time.
Mm.
And it doesn't get replenished. When I spend money, it's gone. It's not getting replenished. So that's quite scary. And I'm very aware that something could happen at any time, because my dad died when I was really young, and
Mm.
a lot of family members died when I was very young. So I'm just very aware of, every time I have a birthday, I'm like, flip, I made it round another time. Gosh, well done, me. you know? Do you know what I mean? So I'm like, I've got that kind of sense of time's constantly running out and there's no safety net, and
Yeah.
it's like an evolutionary response. My body's in fight or flight constantly. So it's hard to know what to do. And so it was interesting seeing that, you're really open about saying, like, guys, I'm not super okay just now. And
Mm.
and I do worry about you as well. And I suppose I part of what wanting to do this was just to say, like, neither of us are necessarily okay, everybody. But we're muddling through and we're trying stuff, but we don't have the answers. I mean, we don't really know what we're doing. We're just trying all the time.
Yeah, it's a really precarious existence right now. I mean,
Mm,
I've had massive issues this year with my sense of mortality,
yeah.
which is also just added. And I'm now starting to look at the clock and starting to worry about health concerns that have kicked in and some shocks that I've had, and then friends dying recently, and
Mm,
it's just all starting to pile up. So that anxiety is there.
mm,
And even in terms of a job, I'm sitting looking at things like houses. I would, I really, really, really need
mm,
space of my own somewhere. Um, but I look at that and it's like I'm never going to be able to get a mortgage. It is
mm,
at this stage. I mean, I've now turned 40. It is highly unlikely that I will ever be in a situation where I have enough money coming in that I could afford to get a mortgage. for the duration that I would need it to be. So
Mhm.
it's not going to happen. So I'm probably going to be looking at a life of paying somebody else far too much money for rent, assuming I can get a kind of property. I'm a single man, so, and I have no partner, and that's unlikely to change anytime soon as well. So I don't even have that kind of comfort of having someone to bitch and moan to. Um, you know, I haven't had that for quite a while, and I mean that's fine. That's just the way that life is gone for me. I'm not moaning about that. Um, but I know that I am capable of a lot more than I'm given credit for. I think
Mhm.
people assume, that you said, I'm prolific. I think people have an assumption that I'm doing a lot of stuff and that therefore I must be earning quite a bit from that.
Mm.
I'm not. I mean, I've just published a book, which I sat on for the bulk of it for 15 years because I
Mhm.
just didn't have the courage to do something with it, and I've found a way of putting it out myself and through my own company, and it it has just about kept me going for another month.
Mhm.
I dare say it'll now sort of it's hit its peak. It's now just going to like trundle along in the background. Um, but like that's nothing to retire on. It's nothing to make me comfortable. It just paid a couple of bills. So I don't know how to change things, and I know a lot of people are going through stuff.
Yeah.
The last couple of years, a lot of people have gone through a lot of really, really difficult things.
Mm.
Some people are experiencing these things for the first time. Some people are finally becoming aware that mental health is something that everybody has to deal
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club. You're a very welcome member. I'm not going to gatekeep. I want
Mm.
you to have those conversations with us, but it's not a.
But
Some
we've
of us
been
seem to
here.
struggle a bit
Sorry.
more.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, yeah. Some of us have been here for quite a while. Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I find it hard. I find it hard to say, and I find it hard to ask. And I'm not. I don't
Mhm.
want people to give me handouts. I would like people to use me for whatever skills it is that they think I have. Um, and to use me regularly when they're in a position to. But I've also been hit by disappointment of late.
Mhm.
Um, there's been a few things where suggestions and promises were made and they haven't been followed through on,
Mhm.
um, for whatever reason. And after a while, that starts to grate, and you do become paranoid. I think
Mhm. Mhm.
about like what I've asked this already. What am I doing wrong?
Mhm. Mhm.
What have I done to piss you off?
Mhm.
Because if I don't, I mean, if I genuinely, you start wondering and you start making assumptions, and not all those assumptions are going to be right.
Mhm.
You can't please all the people all the time, and that's fine. But
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm a creative, so I take it very personally whenever I've done something that it hasn't landed right.
I think that's something I've been really trying to work on is trying not to take things as personally because I do the same. I really internalize everything and overanalyze everything. And I've been really trying to train myself to not reacting in a personal way to things and going, okay, that's something's going on with that person, nothing to do with me,
Hmm.
and just you try and brush it off you because it's quite unlikely that it's anything to do with you. Um, and that's not saying that it's impossible that it's nothing to do. It could be, but it's unlikely because I think a lot of us fall into that trap of making assumptions about what somebody else is thinking,
Hmm.
but we're wildly wrong so much of the time. I mean, often when you've done that, you've assumed something, and then you find out what it is from that person's point of view. You're going, oh, they weren't even thinking about me at all. I've been really silly about this. And I just imagine that is how it is all the
Hmm.
time now,
Hmm.
and depersonalize it. And I think in a way that's helped me be more professional in a sense, because I just try and reset to zero, just be civil, just be friendly, but don't get involved, kind
Hmm.
of thing more and more. Yeah, it's been difficult. I mean, I know what you're saying about disappointments and things. There's been, I think in the past couple of years as well, I've said yes to things and done the job and maybe been paid. And then
Mm.
I've looked back and I've realized, that was actually relatively a tiny amount of money for very
Mm-hmm.
miserable work, actually. Was it worth it? And that's one of the things you have to go through as a freelancer as well, I think, is it okay to, because you feel like you have to say yes to everything because it's money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But then a lot of the time you're getting paid for something that's made your life hell for a few months, and that's happened to me a few times. Or your name is on something out in the world that you're not actually proud of because
Mm-hmm.
you haven't actually gelled very well with the people you've had to collaborate on with that. And so again, without naming anything, there was something I'd worked on collaboratively, and it actually, most of the work was a couple of years ago, but the thing only actually came out this year. And it's one of my biggest disappointments, actually. I'm not proud of it
Right.
at all. It's just something I'm not happy about at all, because I feel like it was largely a shambles. And it really tested my friendship with somebody who I worked with it on. So it's one of those where it's testing the water of who can I really work with,
Mm.
and finding those people, as you were saying earlier, who you can work really well with, because in a way it's more joyful to be able to work with somebody, I can just bounce off that person and we're on a level. And when if there's anything, if anything is relying on contingency, we know we can spar off each other and it'll be fairly natural and it'll go okay. And it's quite hard to just find the person that you or find the people you can really do that with and be on that level with, or not really worry, even if
Mm-hmm.
everything's on fire around you, and you go, I'm in safe hands with that person. It's going to be all right, and I don't know if that's more valuable in a sense than just earning money for doing something, because how it's hard to weigh these things up when you need the money coming in. But you know so I think that's a difficulty that a lot of people maybe wouldn't realize, and I certainly would never have thought of that before being a freelancer. um there were plenty of times when I used to do a lot of freelance proofreading,
Mm-hmm.
and I had some really lovely jobs doing that. And I think it's one of those things where the first few times I did that, it was really good projects and I really enjoyed it. But then as I started to get picked up by people I'd never met before to do it for them, that's when you realize, oh, actually, they're trying to just chip off money for stuff, but make me do more and more for them. And their work isn't actually that good to work with. So it's taking longer than they said it would, because
Mm-hmm.
the quality of their work isn't very good. So it's taking me longer to get through it because it's a real chore and, that sort of stuff. So that's just something I haven't done for a long time because it was making me so miserable.
Mm.
It's relatively easy money to get, but it's miserable money. And I'm really tired of doing miserable jobs.
I think, yeah, there's a balance that's really hard to strike. I mean, there are certain people I have no desire to work with ever again.
Mm.
And if I know that they're on a project, I will probably find some way to extricate myself from it. Thankfully, I've never got that far. Um, and that I suppose is a learned experience that some organizations, that some individuals are just not worth the hassle.
Mm.
Some jobs aren't worth the hassle. I mean, I've had to learn that it's okay to ask to be paid for more stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then also the rates just vary so widely. And I've never had a fixed rate because I will always try and work with a client. If I'm asked to do a certain kind of thing, I got asked to do a workshop a while ago, and I quoted a figure that would have been my standard kind of figure, and it just got a no as a result. Somebody wanted to work with me. It's just like, well, we could have had a conversation about it, and I maybe could have worked out something, but they had an idea, I had an idea, and clearly they were a ballpark away from each other.
Mm.
Um, but it's like, I'll do stuff for the right people if there's an added incentive, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
always willing to discuss it. But at the same time, there's a sense of having to know what you're worth, and to know your
Mm-hmm.
time, and to know what everybody else in the market is charging.
Mm.
I undersell myself all the time. Um, so I don't know. It's very difficult when you're in a situation where you have nothing and you're literally just trying to look towards the bills that are coming in and
Mhm.
getting those cleared, and the need for that money right now to sort those out. It can make it very difficult to be objective about what you're doing and about which
Mhm.
projects you do and don't take on. And you were talking about the need basically to kind of to do something for you that is still creative, that is still fulfilling, as opposed to like doing something that's just a job that's going to earn some money because you need that bank. That's fine, but it can be hard then to say, look, I'm going to commit to 2 months of my time to create this thing
Mhm.
because right now I don't know if I need money now. I need money in a month. I can't
Mhm.
afford 2 months to do this project that
Mhm.
may actually lead into more and other projects later down the line. And I think that's a really, really, really difficult space to navigate. I started doing art during the lockdown again for the first time in 20 years.
Mm.
And you know what? That was going great until I took a commission on that I ended up having to redo several times. I wasn't massively happy with the end product, but this is the nature of it. And then had it all packaged up to deliver, and the person that I'd done it for decided to fall out with me.
Mm.
So that piece of art that I did is just sitting here now. It's never going to go anywhere. I'm not
Aw.
going to get paid for it. I wouldn't have done it had they not asked me to do it. And then you start questioning about whether or not you should do anything with with friends.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, and not my confidence again. I've done very little artwork this year,
Aw.
and I know that's been it's the same thing that put me off for 20 years. It's like I had a negative experience around something that I had spent time doing, and it devalued my sense of self-worth.
Mm.
And that's the same with across all the art forms I find. I react. It's not that I react badly to criticism. I react badly to disappointment and nothing. At least if someone said that was shit, I go, okay, that's fine. That's a very strong reaction, but you clearly didn't like it. That's okay. But if someone says nothing to you, that's a very different kind of feeling,
Mm.
and that feels kind of personal. And I guess that's what I end up zoning in on, and I shouldn't, and I know I shouldn't do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm trying. There was another commission I was supposed to have done, and I really need to get it done for them, whether they pay me or not. I don't even care now because I just want to do it for someone as a friend, to give them this thing. It's weird when someone says I'll give you some cash, and
Mm.
just like, hey, I want to know that you like it first. And I guess it's the same reason why I struggle to pitch other stuff, because there's still that nature of what if it's not very good. I'm much more comfortable then with the live event scenario, which is like, hey, you know what, you're getting paid for this, and I'm
Mhm.
preferably, tell me my fee. Don't give me a based on box office, because that's too unpredictable.
Mhm.
I've worked for box office and it's not been worth my while.
Yeah.
Um, Although it's been creatively a lot of fun, it's been disappointing in the moment. Um, but at least when there's a fee, you kind of know what you got to do. But those are all jobs where you have to take on more tasks and it becomes more than it's worth. And yeah, I don't know how one decides this. I guess you just got
Mhm.
to get lucky. And if you can find people that you like, that you work with, that you spark with, then I would suggest that the thing to do is to keep on working with them, is find as many opportunities as you can
Mhm.
to do that stuff. And if you can turn that into something else, if you're able to build on that and monetize it or whatever else, um, then you should. But that why would you choose to work with someone you don't gel with over someone that you do? I know we've no choice in a regular job, but
Mhm.
creatively,
Yeah.
I think it's okay to have dissenting opinions. I mean, Rachel and I, in any point, I mean, Rachel often does not
Yes.
agree with what I'm
Yeah.
suggesting.
Often I go, come on, Rachel, go on.
I mean, I think whenever I suggested, I think she was one of the ones who voiced concern whenever I said let's have a book burning. She's
Ah.
like, she's like, I don't think we can do that, Robert. It's like, no, we can. This is how we go about doing it, and this is why we're doing it. Um, and I like that. I like someone that will sit there and will question me, and also who I can kind of challenge. You know, we can
Yeah,
challenge each other and there's a respect there. And
sure.
actually, if one of you has a better argument, then you will win that argument because that's
Mm,
how an argument works. But I don't want to work with somebody who's literally going to go, no, and that is it, or who
yeah.
will try and sabotage you in the moment.
Hmm.
Because I've also worked with people like that, and that is not worth it.
No. A bugbear of mine is, oh, we'll agree to disagree. Oh, will we now?
I
I
think I
don't think
disagree
so.
about that.
I don't agree with that. No, I think we need to talk about this. This is important.
You're an asshole. That's just it. No, I mean, there's a point at which you have to step away from an argument, and certain things that you will not be
Yeah.
able to win. And there's certain things that you know. I mean, like still living in Northern Ireland, I can't discuss certain elements of politics with my family because if we get into them,
Mm,
it happened too many times recently. It ends up going into certain arguments that we are so far apart on. There is no chance of any mediation or
for sure.
reconciliation. So you don't have those conversations. You go, look, this is one that we have to step away from,
Hmm.
and that's okay. Like, you know, I don't mind if we don't agree on something.
Hmm.
um I was sitting reading about Terry Gilliam's Into the Woods that the old Vic has cancelled for next year because of opinions that he has voiced in terms of Me Too and I think around some of the trans issues as well. And look, I don't agree with everything Terry Gilliam has said, but he is an artist that I admire, um, and whose work creatively fulfills me. Um, so I don't think I have to agree with his personal opinions
Mm.
to appreciate his art, and I certainly don't think that's a validation for canceling something. Um, why am I even getting onto this one? It's about the disagreement. So I think that's a point at which, you know, you kind of go, like, we're word loggerheads here. We don't agree, but that's no reason why we can't work together. That's a
Mm.
different thing from like literally being antagonistically
Hmm.
trying to
Hmm.
wind each other up.
Hmm.
Um, oh, I don't know. I've another rant that's brewing about all that I'm trying to debate. Am I allowed to get into this one publicly? Will this have me will I get cancelled because I'm daring to show a modicum of sort of respect or support for somebody whose views are now being kind of aired as controversial?
If this goes on my YouTube channel, about two people might see it. So say whatever you want.
You say that, you know, that people target those things and they rip that stuff out of context. This is what I hear
I
about
know,
Twitter.
I know.
A number of debates I now won't get into on Twitter because I know that
Mm.
all they'll do is they'll take away a tweet
We'll just
rather
take a
than,
screenshot of a specific thing out of context.
yeah,
Yeah.
rather than you being able to kind of like, if I blog, at least I know I can kind of put it into a context. I can explain my reasoning, and you know
Yeah.
what? If you're being an
Yeah.
asshole and you take that sentence out, I can kind of go refer you back to its context, and you'll kind of go, all right, okay, I was wrong.
I think people are very often choose not to read things properly. There's just a very sort of, I'll just skim the headline, not even read the headline properly, just skim the headline and then decide what that person's saying or what has been said in that article or whatever.
It's a really. I mean, this is again where I come back down to the need to challenge people and the need to have a thought provoking conversation about stuff, is because we have gotten to a situation where I think a lot of people are very, I think they're very binary in their outlook. They're very black and white. They're very absolute.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And what is completely lacking in a lot of these things is nuance. And people will sit and say, "There's no nuance to this, Robert. This is very very clear." Well, it's actually no, it is more nuanced. That people's thought processes are more nuanced. And actually, the ultimate issue may be black and white. It may be an either or. But in order to kind of discuss it and to get people to think about things, you can't do absolute. Absolute leaves you no room for development and growth. You
Mm.
have to tease it out and take people on a mental journey so that they can think for themselves, or at least think that they're thinking for themselves, and reach a conclusion that is informed. And you may even find that you win some people over because you didn't treat them like a dickhead and cancel them the first time they said something you didn't agree with. And that
Mm.
goes for people of all persuasions, and political viewpoints. You know, it takes that nuance. And this is I think where I'm really frustrated at the moment, is that I want more of those opportunities to kind of have those conversations, and I'm missing it a lot
Mm. Mm.
because this pandemic isn't quite over yet, and while stuff is opening up, trying to securely book an opportunity is very difficult because
Mm.
you have no idea where we're going to be in 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
And if I book an event now and it gets cancelled because of the pandemic, I will not get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm back in a worse situation than, because anytime I've done an event and I know that there's money coming in, I'm planning how that money is getting spent, because I probably have a bill that's going to cover.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very, very, very precarious time for any of us, I think, that are freelancing or are in the arts industries, because I, whilst things are beginning to change, we're still a long way off it. And I think that the tendency is probably going to initially be to go back to the same regular faces that they know will pull bums and seats.
Mm.
And there's less people willing to take the opportunities to experiment.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, like for me, that I need to have that somebody who's willing to take a chance on somebody who's not a guarantee.
Mm.
So I mean, I'm in conversations with the theatre at the moment about trying to do some stuff, but trying to find what shape it's going to take is really difficult,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to waste their time or mine. I want, if we do something, that there might be a chance that one or other of us is getting some money, preferably both of us. But you know, I mean,
Yeah.
they can have the cash as they want. Don't quote me in this, Richard.
Yeah, I think something, I think you hit on something there a moment ago that struck me, is that um when we fell into this, in a way, podcasters were in a fairly good position, but very quickly that
Hmm.
particular market became oversaturated because the world and his wife decided to start making a podcast. And including every celebrity on earth. And of course, their stuff is going to be more findable than anything all the indies were making already. And I mean, I listen to some things. I've got into quite a few podcasts that celebrities I enjoy the company of make, and they're not
Mm.
necessarily huge celebrities, but they're people who people will have heard of. And they start, a lot of them started because they went into a pandemic or had not long started one. And it is very crowded, and in a way, we're all in it together, but we're also crowding each other out. And
Hmm.
I suppose that's one thing as well, where it just even being findable as a freelancer, especially when I find that one of the frustrating things is that, something I've worked really hard on is having basically no resources, little to no resources, but trying to build up the quality of it and trying to find ways, okay, this is how you can soundproof your area. This is how you can improve the quality of a very basic microphone with
Mm.
these, just very homemade, DIY approaches, and lots of different things like that. And then you get celebrities who they just buy one of these, they buy a Blue Yeti, they use it completely wrong. It sounds like total shite. And then, but they get 1 million downloads in the first week because just of who they are and what their name is.
Yeah.
And they're just talking crap, they're just talking nonsense, or maybe they're talking about something useful, but it's not produced or edited or done in any way properly, so that was a bit of a frustration as well. I think it's when there's people out there who are really trying to craft something
Mm.
and working really hard on something, and somebody else who's just got this automatic audience just breezes in and takes everybody anyway. And that's a bit, what are we meant to do? How are we meant to carve out a space for ourselves when we're just crowded out all the time? So I don't really know. That probably is just a moan. I don't really know if there's an answer to this, or
Well,
that's just how life is, or what.
I suppose that's I mean that I suppose that's privilege. I mean, the weird thing is that there's some of them are getting funded and commissioned, and they're not necessarily looking towards other people. And all of us who edit or produce podcasts probably think that our voice is the best and that people should be listening to us rather than somebody else. And certainly I think that some of the stuff I do is pretty bloody good. It's not all good, but some of it's really good, and I find it hard to get that stuff out there too. But then the other thing that I think is really important, and I mean, anyone who watches this who has sat through the whole thing going, my gosh, they didn't edit that at all, and they're telling us we should edit. Um, I think the thing to remember, and I say this every so often, is that if you find somebody whose work that you like,
Mm,
whose content that you enjoy and engage with and want more of, you need to sing their bloody praises. You need
yeah,
to tell people about it. You need to
you do.
reshare their stuff. You need to subscribe to their things. I mean, most of the subscription things are free. Sign up to the free subscriptions. If you really like the stuff and you're lucky enough to have some spare cash, throw them some dosh. You know, that it can be a lifeline. It can be the difference between something sounding like it was recorded underneath a swimming pool and you know like in a nice clear studio environment. You want to kind of do that stuff, but I think having some the idea, I've been talking to my writing workshops about this recently. The idea of a patron
Mhm.
is still really really important. It's a very very ancient idea, the idea that you have somebody there who basically shouts your corner, and those people who shout your corner are like little beacons
Mhm.
for the rest of the world to find you, and you need them. You don't need many of them, but you need a few people there who are willing to kind of to do that stuff. And like it has been a pet hate of mine whenever I've worked on something with in a collaborative thing, and you're doing the socials afterwards,
Mhm.
and people don't reshare
I
or
know.
don't tag. I mean, two things are really important. One, tag your contributors. Two, reshare the shit out of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Like let people know, otherwise they can't find it. And we've been lucky. There's been a few things we've done, and we've had nice support, and we've worked with a couple of celebrities who have happily reshared stuff. I've also experienced the flip side of that, which is when something has that should have been bigger than it was sabotaged.
Mm,
And there was an experience I had a couple of years ago that was terrible and affected a bunch of us. And at some point, that story will get told, and
mm.
the people responsible for it will find that they get named and shamed in public, which so far they have avoided. But I've got the evidence, and I have no problem sharing stuff when I have the evidence on file. So screw you. But yeah, I mean, it's really really important, and like there are some people who will share and share and share, and other people who won't share anything or won't share specific people, and that's hard to take, and you
Mm,
don't know like the difference that makes in someone finding you and not finding you is amazing. So I probably don't share enough of what people do. But I do try and increasingly make a point of if someone has done something and I see it and they've posted something about it, or I bought something, I will share some stuff about that, even if it's just the once, just so people can see it.
mhm.
Um, and what little reach that I may have, because you don't know. I mean, like it's been so lovely. I've seen my book popping up in people's feeds,
Mm.
and I think it's really humbling. And also, it has led to some direct sales. Like some people have gone, "Oh, that book looks really interesting. I think
Yeah.
I'll buy a copy." And you're kind of going, "This is what people need to be doing." There's also
Mhm.
other people who probably should have been sharing the stuff and haven't.
Mhm,
Who,
mhm,
rather than having you on to talk to a podcast to do something about it, have not asked you. And you're like,
mhm,
"Well, this stuff's here. This is exactly the sort of content that you'd be doing." So there is an issue, and that is not lost on me either. So it's a really, I think it's a very Northern Irish thing, but
mm,
actually there's some people elsewhere who are just as guilty of it. But it's
mhm,
a, and it works two ways, because if you're not gonna, if you don't want to scratch my back, I will probably lose interest in scratching yours.
mhm, mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not much keen on the one-sided love affairs. I mean, I would much rather I prefer mutual.
I totally hear you absolutely on all counts. And I've actually got, I think, a lot more better at anytime I ask another podcaster, would you like to come on my show? Can I be on yours as well? I've got better at trying to do that kind of thing, where we do
Mhm.
a almost like a guest swap. Um, which is in part why I brought up the cine punks, because I've been wanting to maybe float that for ages. I think that'd be really fun, even
Why
if we
didn't
did.
you?
I should have. I know. I should have.
Because
I've
that
been meaning to for ages, and I really should have before
but
now.
that's probably a question that actually is more relevant than some of the other stuff we're talking about, because actually, I'm as guilty of it as well. I haven't asked you,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
although you've been on a list that I've thought I need to find the thing that we can get Paula on to do, and it's like, what stops us from doing that for people that,
yeah.
I mean, people we know.
I know, and it takes you ages to get round to them. I know I've got a similar list where I've got a big list of people, and you know, you individually and doing a thing with Cinepunk, like I think any of, I mean, like I always sort of put out an open invitation. I mean, you know, invite yourself to my podcast. I'm that cheap a date, you know, but I know that a lot of people would feel that's rude. But you know, like you're welcome on Audiovisual Cultures anytime, anytime.
Uh,
And I have been meaning to actually. It's just the reason why I haven't for your book, your Wicker Man book, is because I'm a wimp and I can't watch that film. It makes me feel physically sick. So I feel a bit inadequate, you know, but you're very welcome to come and talk to me about it.
I mean, I'm particularly bad at kind of promoting my own stuff.
Mhm.
Which so it's been interesting kind of getting the reactions, you know, and it's a couple of friends have said to me it's like a film, like an introduction to reading a film rather than kind
Uh-huh.
of, you know, which has been an interesting tact, you know, interesting angle for them to come at
Yeah.
from. But it is one of those things. I mean, like I think we all need to be much better. Those of us who do this stuff, we need to be better at asking people that we know for a start. And
Yeah.
actually, you're also more likely to get somebody to say something positive about you if there's
Mm.
somebody you know and you can work with, and that word of mouth makes a big difference. I mean,
Mhm.
I mean, my favorite. I still think it's one of my favorite podcasting experiences was recording with Richard Elfman in LA,
Mm.
up in the Hollywood Hills. Just such a bizarre, surreal week that was. But sitting with him, and I mean, he told me that, you know, one of the reasons he agreed to do the pod was because he listened to some of what we were doing, and really liked
Oh, that's
how
so
we
cool.
approach stuff, you know, and he
Yeah.
liked the way that we approached our questions and everything else. And I'm just thinking like
Mhm.
that's really encouraging. And you know, I mean, Richard, I've got to get him back on. We've already talked about getting him back on because he's got some more
Mhm.
films on the way. And also he's good fun. I just wish we were sitting having
Mm.
barbecue and drinking again once we do it. I suppose we could do it distantly. But yeah, I mean, I mean that's really important to have people that have done it and sing your praises. I've got a few people like that who've been on, have done an event with us, and have told other people, and those other people have then said, "Okay, I'll do that."
Mhm.
Um, and that's how it has to be. We all need to. I think there's a need to boost each other more to amplify
Mhm.
rather than to try and smoosh down, which
Mhm.
there's it's a limited industry. There's only so
Mhm.
much room for people to make anything from this, and
Mhm.
there's only so much room for space. But if each of us is doing something slightly different, there is kind of room for us all to fit in, and you
Yeah.
can be a fan or a devourer of more than one. You've been writing a lot about Star Trek fandom, you
Oh my
know,
goodness. I'm
which
such a
is
nerd.
which is lovely. I had no idea about that about you. I mean, like I always would
It's
have been
very
a
new. It's very new. Late in lifer, late in lifer.
Look, I was always a Doctor Who fan. But I recently,
Yeah.
you know, I watched bits Star Trek on and off. Always liked the films, but I recently watched Picard and I've been watching Lower Decks, and like, you know, there's a side of Star Trek that I'm getting into, and it's okay to have those two fandoms. They are not mutually exclusive. So
Yeah.
just the same as
Yeah.
like, you know, I can listen to audiovisual cultures and also listen to steampunk, and I'm not betraying either one.
No,
You know,
exactly, exactly. Yeah. They bring different things and they do things in different ways. So absolutely.
other podcasts are available, but they're less good.
Exactly. But they're not as good as those two. Those are the two that you should go to first all the time.
I really need to get some more
For
episodes up.
your opinions on movies from Northern Irish people, they're up there.
Yeah, there are a surprisingly large number of Northern Irish.
There's quite a few, but we're not going to mention any of those other
No, some of them I have worked with,
imposters.
and some of them I have thoroughly enjoyed doing stuff with.
I mean, if Banterflix ever see this, hello, same offer is open to you too. Only messing. Well, it's getting quite
Oh,
dark.
it's very dark. You're sort of gradually drifting into like my
I
background.
didn't realize how dark it was getting now because I've been looking at you and your gorgeous illuminated face. I've been looking at myself.
I bought myself a light last year because I realized that I
Yeah,
was descending into darkness during interviews, so I needed to.
it's the golden hour. It's at the moment. This is the thing about the northeast of England at this time of the year. It gets dark at 3 in the afternoon. So
But yeah, it's I mean, I get really frustrated about the lack of support between organizations and
Yeah,
the token support. Um,
yeah.
like I don't know. I don't get precious about a lot of stuff. I just find it right now. I'm frustrated that I can't find a adequate voice out there.
Mm,
Um, but then there's also that need to keep on producing content and keep on
mhm,
producing content that we're not getting paid for, and
mhm, mhm.
that is a hard slog whenever you're looking at kind of, I need to pay some bills this month, so I'm going to have to do some work that actually will generate some income.
Mm.
And I don't know how you get past that.
And it's work that to try and convince people is worth paying for, and is worth your time and your money and that sort of stuff. And it's hard when there's the difference between, it's a lot of us, I think, are trying to go from, I don't want this to just be my hobby. This
Mm-hmm.
is what I do with my life. This is my work. It's actually a lot of labor to put this together. It's a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills, and to certainly to improve those all the time. It's a lot of labor. It's a lot of
Yeah.
time. It's a lot of work. And there are people out there who have production teams because they do have a bit of funding, or they're on BBC Sounds or something, and they've got
Mm-hmm.
a bit of funding behind them, and they've got a team who is employed to do all their editing and they're producing and find their guests for them, and all their graphic design. I mean, you're everything. You're the graphics designer, you're the marketer, you're the you're doing all the writing for it, you're doing all the research for it, you're doing all the just absolutely every bit of it, you're
Mm.
doing it. And I think so many people don't realize how much effort goes into that and how many different skills that requires. And that it does require skill. And actually, you'd notice it if those weren't there. Because if you go
Yeah.
back to the very earliest episodes of mine,
Mm-hmm.
you can barely hear anything because I didn't know anything about gain or amplification. I didn't have a very good mic or anything. I just started because it's one of those things where if you're out there wondering, should I even bother? Yes, bother, try it. Just start. Don't let anybody put you off. Just start and learn on the job.
Yeah.
Um, but but you can hear, if anybody ever is brave enough to go right back to the start with mine, you can hear the changes coming in as mics improve, as my editing skills improve, and all the rest of it. So it's a lot of work to build that up, and it means that your skills are transferable elsewhere. But then it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to make the case that, look guys, I'm a good podcast editor, give me a job if you've got one. And I've tried that. I was in talks with somebody one time, and then they
Mm-hmm.
just never got back to me, by editing their podcast for them. And yeah, it's a tricky one, but there's a lot involved, and we're worth a lot more than we get, I think, is the main point we're making.
Absolutely, I think so. And I mean, as you just said, it's a great training on the job. And we've this weird thing where occasionally I'll drop in a live show we've recorded like from 4 or 5 years
Mm,
ago, and I can spot the differences. They're so massive as
mm,
each of us has grown in confidence. As the
mm,
people I've worked with have come back, and people who were maybe nervous doing the first show or two with me, I've come back, and for 3 or 4, they're like, and there's one or two I can't like. I no longer can get the shut up. They just once they've got the mic, that's them. They're away. They're happy. I've done a good job in nurturing that. I appreciate that as well. But
mm,
yeah, it's a weird thing, and I guess I mean, this is us trying to use our privilege and our privilege of democratization that we can
mm,
create, and we can create for a relatively small amount of money, although it still costs electricity, still costs equipment. If something gets broken, you still got to replace that, and if you've got no money coming in, that becomes very, very difficult. But we have, we do all those things, and we do stuff that people just assume gets given for free.
mm,
I mean, even television, I think most people don't realize that ultimately you got to pay for that.
mm.
That all that TV you watch, somebody had to pay for at some point.
Yeah.
It's not just, it doesn't just happen.
Mm-hmm.
But it just means that maybe you're not the one that pays the bill, or your contribution is tiny in comparison. So I think our expectations are massively skewed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm glad that people are continuing, and as competitive as the field gets, and as frustrated as I get whenever somebody else lands a gig that I would have loved, and I think that they're not as good,
Mm.
which does occasionally happen. I'm not so shy about it that I'll say I could have done a better job, because sometimes I've sat there and
Mm.
I've gone, I would have done a better job than that. Um,
And
but it's good that that people are able to, and
mm.
hopefully more people will find a way through.
Mm.
But for freelancers, it's just a minefield right now. It's I don't know how you manage to land the work regularly. That's the thing. Even if you can get a gig, it's trying to get the gigs and keep them
Yeah,
coming.
that's it. That's it. Oh dear. Well, I'm just seeing the time. We've been gabbling on for a while, all unpaid, of course. And so I think is there anything else you want to point out, Robert, before I stop the recording?
I
Any
I don't
missions?
I don't think so. I mean, like a lot of stuff, I kind of talk every now and then about this stuff online. But I think the thing to
Hmm.
remember is that people shouldn't be afraid to ask the questions.
Sure.
I think people shouldn't be ashamed to say when they're not they're finding it difficult, and I mean, it's not a reflection necessarily in your quality either.
Yeah.
There are people who do
Yeah.
really good work who really struggle to find regular work,
Yeah.
and other people who write dirge, who contribute rubbish, are in employment all the time.
Hmm.
There's a whole bunch of reasons why these things happen, but I think more honesty about it probably would help. I think it would demystify a lot of things. Um, and I suppose everything else is like, if anyone ever wants to chat or follow, I mean, like,
Hmm.
just hit the buttons. I mean, like, I don't care. It's nice to see the numbers go up, and people's
Yeah.
engagement to increase, but I mean, I, I'm a fairly open book.
Yeah. That's those are some really, really important points to, I think, to wrap up on. And I totally second everything you've just said. Yeah, chat with us, talk with us, ask us stuff, ask people stuff. Yeah, that's really important. Well, I just appreciate so much you doing this, and it's been so great to catch up. And yeah, I just hope we learn as well for ourselves. Do this more often. Check in with
Yeah.
each other more often. This is, I hope, been really valuable for us personally, and hopefully somebody out there might get something out of it too.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you as always, and we will find some excuse to actually do some proper work together. It's soon. I can't guarantee it's paid, but some work.
Yeah, just for the joy of doing
The
it.
creatively fulfilling stuff, and hopefully, if there's ever an opportunity to do something that actually generates some income too, I'll give you a shout.
That would be awesome. But yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Mashups.
Pleasure.